Geocachomaniacs.
GeoGearHeads.
Welcome back to GeoGearHeads, episode 245. We've got a little bit of an esoteric topic tonight. We're talking about GPSR maps, loading those cool free maps onto mostly the Garmin units, because, well, most of us who have GPSRs have Garmin units. So we're going to be talking about those free options, how to get them on a whole bunch of stuff with that. Before we get into that, though, we have some feedback and some news from geocaching.com. I'm Daryl W4 I was about to say the bad cop, but it's now Chris of the Northwest, my usual co-host, so don't get confused. Chris, welcome back to the show.
Well, thank you. Daryl, my first question is, what does esoteric mean? But I assumed it was some type of spice. Anyway.
Exactly. But our resident Canadian, I'm sure, will be able to help us.
Well, he's more token than resident.
Okay.
It's true. It's true.
He says so himself. But we're happy to have Mr. Dave DeBear, DeBear Maker, if we're going to go with the full name, or DeBear, if we're going to go with the geocaching name. Thanks for joining us tonight.
Oh, you're more than welcome. And feel free to call me anything you want.
Just don't call you late for dinner.
Absolutely not.
Nice. Well, Daryl, you said we've got some feedback, so let's go ahead and jump right into that. We have feedback from the very last show. That was episode 244. This one comes from the Wooden Radio via email. He says, mentioned was a cacher with only 10 finds and junk caches. How many caches are needed to place good caches? We've got a cacher here in Baltimore with over 1,200, that is, hiding caches in baggies, not even heavy freezer baggies. Wow.
Yeah, so it's this old argument, which we got into again a little bit in the last show. Didn't really get into it, but I think most of the audience knows that I'm not a fan of limiting to the number. I think that's not going to work. And Dave, you had a bunch of comments on this one in the document too.
Yeah, I mean we've covered this many times in many ways, but I know cachers that have hidden 10,000 hides and they still put out junk caches. I know cachers who just heard about geocaching, never had one find and put out a cache, and it was an amazing cache. So there's no real correlation between number of finds and what people put out. I'm not really sure what the answer is to get this going, but just putting an arbitrary limit on so many finds before you can hide your first cache is not the answer.
No, and
it could be rate limiting, but
well, I'm thinking the most of the people I've seen who do a lot of hides will come up with at least durable hides, but I wouldn't necessarily call them quality hides. So that's not even the answer.
Yeah.
Now, junk hides, there is a time and a place for a light pole cache. Completely understand that. But a baggie, hiding a baggie in a tree is not necessarily a good hide. But, if you're in Arizona, perhaps that holds up for, a year. I don't know.
Well, and really I think what Scott was trying to get into is that they're having a rash of hides where they're new hiders getting into things like putting the food into caches. One of the FTS he went for, I think it was early this summer. I'd have to, go back and check it. But they actually found food in the cache with a note, hey, thanks for finding our first stash. Have a treat on us. No.
Which sounds nice, doesn't it?
It really, really does.
But sticking a $5 Starbucks card rather than putting food in the cache.
Yeah, it really comes down to reading those descriptions, and so far the only idea that I've come up with is maybe for the first hide or second hide as well, you have to go and answer a quiz about the requirements for hiding a cache before you're allowed to list it. Aside from that, I really don't think there's a good solution for it, and I don't know that answering a quiz is going to solve everything either.
Another way that's a bit heavy-handed would because that violates the guidelines, like wholesale, full stop, no interpretation.
Right, exactly, and that's why I'm suggesting this.
Like a really heavy-handed way to do it. I'm not totally suggesting this, but kind of like an extreme way of doing it would be if a cache has been shown to violate the guidelines, then the cacher cannot hide a cache for basically put in a penalty box for a period of time, so they can't put out another cache until they've fixed it or shown that they can do it. It's kind of, and that's really heavy-handed, but that's kind of one way to kind of approach it.
Like 2 years or a good flogging.
One of the two.
Basically presume that everyone can hide a cache until they prove otherwise.
Presume it, but once they prove that they can't, then
Then that gets into how do you prove they can't?
Right.
This is part of the problem. Which is
so
why I'm not.
Somebody says, "Well,
we should do it," but
I'm sure we've all had times in our geocaching experience where the new caches they all come up, and I'm going to go back to LPCs. These are all LPCs. These caches stink. Well, that could be, but be that as it may, there's nothing inherently illegal in it in the game.
Okay, Limax has an idea that I like the idea, but it's completely impossible. He says you must find caches and submit 20 glows.
And there's silence.
Yes.
What's a glow?
See,
what's a glow? Well, that goes back to the other show that I'm on, Caching in the Northwest. We do a geocaching log of the week where we read an interesting or very well written geocaching log in order to help promote that within the community, that you can write good logs.
And you haven't even done 20 weeks of that, I don't think.
No, and I keep getting 2, 3, 4 of those a week coming in, so
sure.
I've got this big list of ones to sort through. So it's a lot of fun to read, and in fact it spurred me to write better logs. So there was if you have the time, it does take some time to write an interesting log. Sometimes I feel creative and it just flows out of me, and bam. And I like to go check back because you'll see the next log entry or note. They say, that was one of the funniest things I've read. Well, okay, thanks. They'll never tell you, but, just
Pete
an
Mavaju in the chat room is saying, I'm going to paraphrase because I don't want to get into all of it, but basically, if you want to do the goodies, why not host an event? And I think that's a great idea. Maybe you encourage people to host events as their first hides rather than doing the cache container.
Physical.
Yeah, and then you get to kind of force everyone to meet the community and maybe find someone to mentor them. I don't know that it's very viable, but I like the concept.
Not a bad idea. I mean, I think the answer somewhere is the community kind of mentoring new cachers. Because there's a balance between being, overhanded and not doing anything, and not doing anything doesn't work. And being overhanded doesn't work either. But it's kind of a nice middle ground way of kind of introducing people and talking about what makes good caches and all that stuff before they actually do it. Plus, it's nice and you get food.
So I've never gone up to anybody and said, "Oh, so you're the one who hid those lame caches. That's good to see you." You know what, though? Yeah. I should. Daryl?
I've seen some
intervention.
Interesting ones. Yeah. Let's move on. And Rock Chalk had actually emailed a quick update to us, more detailed version of which is on their blog. But the point is that the old paid geocaching app will not shut down this month as was originally planned due to the lack of some features in the new app. And those right now are the offline and trail maps, additional log types, draft logs, and favorite points. They are currently targeting March of next year to have those added in. So all of that's, they'll probably have a lot of it before then, but all of it is probably going to be in by March of next year. So the old app cannot be and will not be updated. But what I read into the statement, and I'm still waiting for her confirmation, it sounds like that old classic app will not function after they do that shutdown. So it's not going to work at all. It's not just it's not going to be updated. They're actually going to shut down the connections to that app on their servers.
Right. And right now they're targeting March 2017. That's not a fixed date, but that the old geocaching app, the green fielded logo, will shut down sometime next year. And I think that's fine. There's times where the old app does things that the new app doesn't do yet. So the classic app, as they're calling it, is still going to continue to function. But I think the one thing they missed was souvenirs.
Yeah, I did notice that, and I'm thinking they're just not going to do that. That's kind of obnoxious, but it's maybe what's going to happen is that comes in later, but it's not a critical feature.
Right.
But I do seem to remember some conversations where the classic app, as they're calling it, was not actually using the API, so it did have its own servers.
Oh. Well, they in the email and in the blog, they mentioned that it's just too expensive and too time-consuming to keep both apps running.
Right.
I'm like, well, what does it matter? Aren't they using the same resources? But
No.
I hadn't thought of that, Daryl.
Yeah,
Very good
yeah.
point.
Even if they didn't, it's a lot of work to keep two apps running, especially if you haven't all the libraries in the back end and stuff. It's having two is, it's not a little bit more than having one. It's a whole lot more than having one.
Well,
Especially
and I know that the current, formerly Intro, but the current app,
GeoCaching app?
Right, the GeoCaching app does not use the live API either. It has its own access.
Really?
Yeah, because that's how they're getting access to things like the messaging. Now, some of that, I believe, and I don't know because no one has told me for sure, but I believe some of that is they are working on merging the new Live API 2 that they've been supposedly working on with what they're doing for the current app. So, kind of one of those, maybe they're engineering the Live 2 app or 2 API to meet what they feel they need for the new official app, the formerly Intro app.
Interesting. Well, I was actually shocked when at the bottom of the blog post they said, because there are other apps out there such as Cachly looking for cache. They didn't mention CGO, but
Well, CGO is not a live API app.
That's true. But anyway, these other apps that are pushing the envelope, that it's kind of pushing them to make theirs better. So.
Well, my answer really is if you're using the official app, why? It's the only reason that I use it. Yeah, that's a good reason. And I do get people using the Intro app as the Intro app, even though it's not called the Intro app anymore. But the only reason I use that app is for the messaging.
Exactly.
And it's awesome because I need to have, I shouldn't say need, but I really have come dependent on having the instant notifications where I'm in the field, I message someone through that app, and most of the time I'm getting responses fairly quickly, and it's pushed right to the phone. I don't have to worry about going through, maybe that person's on Facebook, maybe they're on Twitter, maybe I have their number and I can SMS them. It's just message them right in the app, and for that, it's really handy. And that's the only thing I use it for, but it does such a bad job of that.
Yeah. Well,
we talked about that last week.
Don't lose that number.
Yeah. We'll move off of this topic as well, because we're talking tonight about loading the maps onto GPSR, specifically the free maps, and mostly for the Garmins. So we're going to start off with the one that most of us who've tried this go to right away, and that is GPS File Depot. And it's really just a repository of bunches and bunches of maps for, all different regions, states, countries, province, whatever. It doesn't matter. You can go there, you can pick what you want, and you can find something for that area.
Yes, indeed. Although I tend to only go there lately for topo maps. I get my other maps from OpenStreetMaps, but I've usually only gone there for topo maps lately.
Well, and you will find the OpenStreetMaps there.
You will.
Yeah, but you'll find the OpenStreetMaps many times with additional overlays. So it's not just the OSM, and that's one of the reasons why this works for some people. And I just went to the California page and pulled it up, and the very first line is Amtrak. They have an Amtrak map that you can go and load on your GPSR.
Oh, that's
nice.
Fabulous.
This is the kind of weird esoteric stuff that you can get there.
There's that word again.
Yeah, I know. It's weird, isn't it? But it's really, really tough to use some of this stuff because you don't know what you're going to get and where you're going to get it. So it's a great resource because you can find all kinds of great stuff. The trail maps, topo maps, street maps, routable, points of interest, maybe no points of interest. Sometimes it's even drag and drop. It's images that you just drag right onto the Garmin unit to load it. Other times you have to run it through one of the various apps. So when I went to load my, what is it that I just got, Chris? Is it the 750? I feel so stupid right now.
I don't think you got the 750. I think that has the camera. I think you got the 7.
Yes, I did get the 750. I got the silly camera.
Okay.
Mostly for the extra. Mostly for the extra RAM, and there was something else that it had that I felt I should have. I can't remember which. But when I got this and loaded it up, I went right away to GPS File Depot and ended up not using it because I couldn't find a complete set of maps for the 50 states, and even Canada was giving me a hard time finding the maps that would actually work.
Canada does give you a hard time.
Canada's a problem, I gotta tell you.
Yeah, which is why we have our token Canadian on.
Yeah.
Translate, yeah.
Daryl, you mentioned something and breezed right over it, and I want to go back to it. You said you can even download routable maps.
Yes.
That's huge, because that means you can take your GPS and say, hey, I want to go to this address or location, and it will route you on the streets. That's what the routable means. I didn't want to gloss that over for anyone.
Right. And the routable is an actual checkbox on that list to tell you that these are routable. And not all of these maps are routable. That is something that if you want it, you have to check it. And we're going to get into that a little bit more later as well. But routable on my outdoor unit is not something that I look for. It's nice,
right,
but I don't look for that because I'm not using my handheld as a routing device. I use it just as a reference device. I want usually topos. I don't need the topos, and what I ended up with were just OSM maps, and it has the trails. So to me, most of the time that's going to be more useful. You're not finding caches frequently that are off the trail more than a few hundred feet, so having the trails are enough of a reference. I prefer to have the topo lines because that really is helpful in situations where you have enough terrain change, but in many cases around here in the Midwest, there's not enough variance in the terrain that the topo lines really can help you out.
That's what the overpasses are for.
If I'm in the middle of the woods, there aren't any overpasses.
That's the only time you're going to see the topo lines change is around the overpasses on the freeway. At least that's what when I grew up in Ohio, that was our highest point we knew.
Yeah, well, you'll get it around the rivers sometimes.
That they can go down around the rivers. You're right.
Exactly, and that's about the only time it seems to really show up.
It doesn't go up; it goes down. You're right.
Yeah. So I ended up with the OSM maps when I did mine, And there is a wiki page on the OpenStreetMap site, which, of course, we're going to have links to this stuff in the show notes. Don't worry about it. Head over there and check it out. And they actually have a Garmin download page where you can go and get the pre-done maps ready to go for your various regions. They list which ones are which. And in my case, I ended up with the GMap tool OSM Topo Routable, which is in regions, so I could grab that, download that, and the little bit that I played with it, that's worked very well for me. So that's the source I went to. Again, we're going to drop this in the show notes so you can pick it up. But it is not as full-featured as I want because it doesn't have Canada. So I ended up getting my Canada maps from somewhere else.
As a point of reference, how large were these downloads? I know they were regional, so we're not talking an individual state, but maybe 2 or 3.
I want to say that the whole thing could fit on a CD-ROM, so probably under 600 megs.
Okay.
But I don't have that handy.
That's a good point of reference. Okay.
Yeah, and that's the thing. When you're dealing with these vector-based maps, they are not big files. They are pretty easy to stick into your GPSRs.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm looking at the Pacific OSM topo map, and it's reporting that to be under 800 megabytes.
Mm-hmm.
Now, that's the raw map. You do have to run it through a tool. In my case, I was on the Mac. I used the Garmin Map Install and Map Manager for the Mac, which handles all of it. Now, different tools on Windows handle different types of these, so it's not quite as cut and dry as just download this tool. You may have to download a different tool for different maps, but when you go to those pages, they'll tell you what to do.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Dave.
As far as size goes, I have most of North America, except for like the Northwest Territories, like anything above civilization in Canada. And with OpenStreetMaps and Topo Maps, I think it works out to 20 gig for the entire continent, which fits easily on a 32 gig micro SD card, which is what I slap in my GPSR. But you can put a large amount of stuff on relatively cheap media and have the whole world with you.
Yeah, and
nice.
One catch is your local area. In most cases, I like to load that into the internal memory because of performance. It's all about the performance.
Mm-hmm.
But the extended areas, you can throw those onto the card. It just might take a little longer to load. The newer units are so much better. This one, I don't really notice the troubles that I had with like the 62 and the 30, the GPS Map 62 and the eTrex 30, where it was a little sluggish when you tried to open them from the SD card. But in this case, my maps all fit on the internal, so I did move stuff around and move some of the stuff off onto the SD card, mostly for testing. But I don't need as much RAM as this thing has for not RAM, but the non-volatile. So I've put all my maps in there just for performance. I may end up needing more than that, especially when I start playing with a Bird's Eye, because they do offer Bird's Eye for free for a year, I think, when you get it. Yeah. So I'm going to give that a shot, mostly just to see what it's like. But previous attempts at using Bird's Eye were very disappointing. When you are used to Google Maps,
mm-hmm.
Bird's Eye just wasn't cutting it.
No. So Bird's Eye is Garmin's version of satellite view from your GPSR. So
yeah, it's downloadable GPS images.
Satellite images, yeah.
Right, but those take a lot of room, and because it's downloaded to your device, they're not updated as frequently, and you do have to have the subscription to get those updates. Another thing we need to mention are trail maps, and there are some really, really awesome projects that focus on just the trail maps, where these are overlays. You can drop them onto your existing Garmin maps if you have those Garmin maps. And I shouldn't say that because I know some of them were not overlays. Some of them were actually doing just their own maps with everything in them. But check out switchbacks.com, the Northwest Trails project. That's run by Mountain Bike. We also talked with the Northern Penguin, who runs the Ontario Trails project, and you can check that episode out, episode 60, and learn more about what he had done with that and what it takes to actually create those maps. And it's kind of cool and very something that I don't want to handle. We'll just leave it at that.
I'm so happy that other people do it. Don't get me wrong. In the Q&A, I'm hearing that Limax is having some audio problems because he says anytime you say Garmin, he hears Magellan. So it obviously must be a problem with his computer or phone.
Yeah, that's on his end. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm thinking that might be a malware that's been installed.
Oh, there you go.
So you might want to do a scan.
Yeah, but you can get all these maps that we were talking about. They're also for the Magellan. Limax likes Maps for Me. That's mapsforme.net.
Right, which does have the Magellan compatible stuff.
Yeah. He also says he had to use an external SD card to load the topo maps onto his Magellan, and all he has is the Western U.S. So there you go. We're up to date now.
All right, we're cruising right through this stuff. And next bit is actually some email from Jersey Eric. So, Chris, why don't I let you read that one?
Love to. Jersey Eric sent email saying, I have a Garmin eTrex 30 GPSR. I downloaded a free OSM OpenStreetMaps generic routable map image file whenever I plan to visit a new U.S. state or Canadian province and just drag it onto my GPSR. My question, is it okay to have more than one OSM generic routable map enabled on a GPSR at the same time? For example, is it okay to have the OSM map for New York enabled at the same time as the OSM map for New Jersey is enabled? Do we want to stop there, or do we want to keep answering questions?
Well, let's keep going, and then we'll just talk about it generally.
Okay. He goes on and says, if it is okay, then how does the GPSR handle the multiple enabled maps? Is it more of a concern to have multiple maps on the same state enabled, such as the OSM generic routable map of New Jersey and a topo map of New Jersey? By the way, he's grabbing these all from garmin.openstreetmap.nl.
Yeah, that's
right.
where I grab my maps from, too. So, yes, it is perfectly fine to have multiple maps on your GPSR. For the same region or for multiple regions. The one catch is that usually when you download maps, they come with a generic name. I forget the exact name, but it's gmapsup.img, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
So just before you copy those onto your GPSR, just rename that map to whatever, like my Canadian maps are just Canada.img. And I basically have three sets of files. I have Eastern US, Western US, and Canada, and they're named Eastern US, Western US, and Canada. And I copy all those to the GPSR, and it works just fine. For topo maps, some maps are designed to be overlaid on top of other maps. Usually topo maps and trail maps are those. And if you have the OSM maps and the topo maps or whatever, both enabled is fine. They'll just topos will just display seamlessly over the other ones, and that's perfectly fine as well, which is exactly what I do. One caveat that I kind of noticed, I'm not sure if it's with the brand new Garmin's, but the ones I've used, like the eTrex 30 and was it Montana 600, is that they didn't seem to like more than 10 maps files. If you copied over, like originally I downloaded all 50 states as 50 separate states and copied them over, and it would not really recognize only the first 10. So if you what I would recommend if you have a wider area that you're kind of interested in is just to, if you go to that site, what is it, garmin.openstreetmap.nl, you can make custom maps, download custom maps of larger areas. And I would recommend doing that so you have fewer actual map files. And it just seemed to, in my experience, it would work smoother that way. But otherwise, it's pretty transparent as to which maps are active, and it just, as it goes from map to map, it just seamlessly works. It's actually pretty slick my experience, provided you have the right number of files.
Well, and there are the potential bugs that you might run into, and I did have an issue with the City Navigator maps at one time on Garmin. So Garmin maps on the Garmin units, where because I had loaded them in as individual files, something got messed up when it tried to blend them together, and it tried taking me off the road, driving 50 miles in a different direction, and then back 50 miles that same direction to get back on the same freeway, because for whatever reason it didn't want to connect those.
Or
so
it broke right there at the state line.
Yeah, you'll get those weird glitches, and it has nothing to do with the OSM maps. It's the Garmin maps obviously were good Garmin maps. It works normally, and what I had to do is just load it in as one file because there was a glitch in the software on the unit that created that problem.
Mm-hmm.
So you will have potentially bugs that will always interfere with that. It's not necessarily the maps, but it can be the maps, especially if you're getting the maps from different sources. And that's one of the reasons why going to the GPS depot or file depot might not be the best idea, because if you are trying to use those as routable maps, if you get the maps from two different sources, even if they're like two different generations of the same map, they might not meet up and might give you some issues with the routing. So stick with a single source if you want to do the routing. That's my best recommendation.
Yeah. Now, I don't have any experience with newer Garmin units, but the older ones had a problem with number of files, period, whether they were map or GPX or whatever. It had trouble handling a large number of files. So that was my experience.
Yeah, usually smaller number of files is better. As far as I know, there's no performance difference by having 10 smaller maps or one file that has all the maps in one. It's just a matter of how the device actually handles those separate files. But I find the small number of files is the better. It's easier to manage from a file perspective.
Right. And if you can, definitely do it. The reason that most people I know have done the multiple files is purely for that management of moving it on and off of the GPS. Which, if you're limited that much, great, I understand it. But I really would suggest the fewest number of maps. So fill your card or your GPS, whatever you're doing that on, as tightly as you can, while still allowing room for your GPX files, because you obviously need those caches. Fill it as tightly as you can with the map file and try to make it one file, because you're going to have fewer issues as one file than as two.
Mm-hmm.
Whether it be a software glitch, whether it be just loading, it generally does seem to work best to have one map file than to have 10.
Indeed. Although, if I recall correctly, unless they've changed it recently, if you go to the OpenStreetMaps.nl site, you can't download all of North America in one file. It just won't let you. I can't remember if it's number, because if viewers go there, you'll see that you can select certain sections of the map, and they're all kind of randomly sized. I can't remember if it's number of squares that you can select per map, or if it's just file size, but there were limitations. But you could break it into like 3, which is perfectly manageable. But typically I try to do that. Like my roaming area, where like my day-to-day, I'm going to go caching today, I leave my house, I have that as one file, and then I have the other stuff there for when I travel, so I don't have to worry about loading maps. But they're on separate files, and I put all my roaming area in one file for that specific reason, that there's less risk of there being those issues with multiple files at the same time. Another thing I do actually is I have downloaded just my state, and actually South Carolina, because I kind of live near the border. And I have those on both the SD card that I have and the internal memory, because I have had the SD card die on me, because SD cards. They're not
because reasons.
Yeah, who knows why, but they have died. I mean, formatting fixed it, but when I was in the field, it didn't work. And the solution then is just pull out the SD card. I have a much smaller set of maps, but they worked, which saved the day. So I tend to do that. If I go on a trip to like a mega where I know I'm going to be doing caching a lot of in that area, I'll just grab that state as a separate file, stick it on my internal memory, and I'll still use the other maps for most of the time. But if they happen to turf out on me, then I can just remove the SD card and be back in business.
Yeah, great point. But going back to the number of map files, I have seen where a particular tool works in like regions only, and you can only pick so much, limited by size. I know some of the GPSs have had limits on the file sizes, but most of those, if I remember, you won't have a problem loading even the US into a single file unless it's more than just being the vector map. So if you have any raster images, then yeah, you're going to run into a lot of problems.
Right. And routable stuff also increases because you need route information as well.
Right.
So if you don't need routable stuff, don't include it. Your file size will be smaller.
Excellent points, yeah. So we've done a lot in not a whole lot of time here, but I wanted to check if anyone here has played with any of these trail map projects, because frankly, I haven't had a chance to dig up anything for my area, and I haven't really played with it. I know some people in the area have played with various trail maps, but for me, the OSM trail maps are good enough.
Interesting. I feel very blessed to be in the Northwest and have switchbacks.com for the Northwest Trails project. It was a while into my geocaching career before I found that. And it was like, whoa, how do maps work? Load it. It immediately works once you turn it on, and the trails are very well defined out here in the Northwest. So I can't speak to the Ontario Trails project. You know, I'm sure it's done very well, but I haven't used it.
Yeah, I've used the Ontario Trail stuff. Not as much as I like, because obviously I don't live in Ontario. But when I have been back home and using it, they have been very well marked. It's basically the same thing. They're just there and they just work. It's almost seamless. The only things that weren't really on there were like really weird trails that aren't really trails, but they just happen to be like something beside a farmer's field that people have turned into a trail, but it's not technically a trail. But those were very few and far between. Most of the stuff was there and marked well.
Well, that's true. Sorry, Daryl, go ahead.
I was going to say the OpenStreetMaps trails generally are done about the same way that these trail projects are. Someone goes out with a GPS, tracks trails, uploads them, and flags them as trails. So the projects aren't dissimilar, but the trail projects are really focused on just those trails. And that's where they're spending a lot of time, and you have people who are very, very dedicated. So you should be getting really excellent data out of those projects.
Right. I think it's a good point in time to remind people that you can add trails to OpenStreetMaps. The nice thing about it is that it's editable by humans. You don't have to be in a secret club to update stuff. I've done this with the local trails in my area, and it's a very simple process. But you can do it. So if you want to help out the other people in your area and you don't want to have a whole project of mapping my state or my province, if you just map the trails that you happen to walk on when you're geocaching and add them to OpenStreetMaps, then it takes a little bit of time. I'm not sure exactly delay, but eventually those trails will show up. So the next time you download them, odds are they'll be there for the next person. And then everyone will love you and you'll be awesome and famous.
Well, except nobody knows exactly who put it in there, so you'll be awesome.
That's when you put, so-and-so trail bracket your geocaching name.
Oh, there you go. Okay.
Don't actually do that, but
yeah, that could get your data kicked out from a lot of those projects. But one thing I did want to mention is that this is one of those GPSR benefits that you don't get with the smartphones. Most of the time, you can't load in your own maps. There are some apps that will let you do that, but we have, with the GPSR and all of these excellent map projects, an ability to customize maps like you just don't get on the smartphone. Now, that said, my preference still is for satellite view on a smartphone. Nothing really seems to beat that for me.
I find, as much as I hate myself for saying it, a lot of my GPSR is getting much less traction because the smartphone just works, and a lot of the things that annoyed me about the earlier generations of smartphones, those annoyances are going away mostly, and my phone's becoming my go-to device, unless I'm actually, in the field where there's no cell signal.
A couple of quick things in the chat room. Limax asked if they are still doing street views for trails. I'm assuming he's referring to the Google Street View team. And I just saw something within the last couple of months about some exotic trails that they've been doing. It might have even been in partnership with the National Park Service. I don't remember. But yes, they were still doing the backpacks with the huge globe over the guy's head.
Yes, which is awesome. I love that backpack.
I want that backpack. Please give geocachers that backpack.
I once got caught by that backpack while geocaching.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I was near Google. Yeah, I was near Google headquarters, and I was finding a cache for the day, which is in this park kind of behind it. And so I grabbed the cache. Then I was holding it in my hand, signing the log, and I looked up, and I saw this guy off in the distance with his globe over his head. I was like, "What the heck is that?" I didn't know at the time what it was, and then I was like, "Oh, great, wonderful!" So I quickly signed the log and hit it. And then as they were walking closer to me, then as they were walking closer, I realized it was the Street View guys. So I introduced myself and said hi and offered my services to be a trekker for North Carolina, but they haven't taken my offer up yet. But it's still there if anybody's listening.
Nice. Then the next bit that we want to mention, Team Aviju says, the most important part for this podcast, once you have visited an area which is not mapped, you can do it yourself on the OpenStreetMaps website, and don't forget to donate to them because you are using their product.
Really good point. OpenStreetMaps is, there's been times when other maps had problems. They've come and they've gone. Google Maps charged. OpenStreetMaps has been there the whole time, and they're absolutely free, and it's a great product. So if you use it, go ahead and give them a little something.
All right.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's not cheap to do what they do. I'm not sure how they stay in business or what the model is, but I know being a big data computer guy, that stuff's not cheap.
No, and I should say it's free to us. I don't know if it's free to developers.
Right, but even though
a
few bucks given is well worth the benefits that we get out of them.
Yeah, and we've done a couple of shows on OSM, OpenStreetMaps. Maybe it's time to do another one. But last I knew, it was entirely free to use the data from their projects. So, developer or not, you just have to do it. The thing is, you can't just link to their API and grab the information live and have it mapped. So it always has to go through someone else who has the tile servers and all that kind of stuff. So it's the raw data that generates the map for what you see. And with that, we're going to wrap up this episode. Thanks again, Dave, for joining us. It's been a pleasure having you on, and hopefully it won't be quite so long till the next time you're on.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Anytime, especially talking about GPSR maps. That's a confusing topic for a lot of people.
Excellent.
And we want to say thank you to Lullaby for You for the very succinct 5-star iTunes review, simply entitled, "Wow."
Yeah, we love those iTunes reviews, especially the 5-star, because it does help raise people's awareness of the show. But I just love the wow.
Okay, maybe it's wow because there is an exclamation point.
Yeah, wow. I don't know. Maybe she can call in. Well, not call in, but send us an audio file to tell us how to pronounce that, because obviously we're having some issues with it.
Whoa.
Yeah, we're totally pronouncing it wrong.
It's 3 letters. You can take it lots of ways. Wow. I'm not sure here.
No, yeah, whatever. But we do have a bunch of great shows coming up. If you ever want to check out that list, just head over to the GeoGearHeads.com site and hit the upcoming, or it's GeoGearHeads.com/upcoming to make it quick and easy. Next week, we're going to try once again to do our GPS versus smartphone with the Land Monkey and Scott Burke. So everyone I know is going to want to check that one out again, and hopefully it won't get prematurely truncated by technical difficulties.
It broke the internet last time, Daryl.
It totally broke my internet. It went and cut the fiber. So that's how intense this debate really is.
It's so hot it burns fiber.
It's really amazing. And then September 22nd for episode 247, we're going to be talking about 3D printed caches again. We've got Antaeus, and hopefully C. Nelson is going to be able to join too and give us a whole bunch of insight on printing 3D caches. We're excited to have our favorite Jennifer, Team AJK, or Team Magic, join us to talk about puzzles yet again on the 29th. Then for the first show in October, it's another randomize. This is XLX. Extra large.
I'd like to buy a vowel.
I know. XLX was such a cool one, and
yeah,
I'm not sure what to call this one.
Slick. Slick. How do you pronounce X?
Yeah, there's a bunch of different ways.
But while we're thinking about that, we want you to check the Cachemaniacs website at cachemaniacs.com for more on the GeoGearHeads, including show notes from this and all of our episodes. We love hearing from our listeners, so leave us feedback by emailing geogearheads at cachemaniacs.com or through the many channels of social media. Your support helps keep the Cachemaniac shows coming. Please consider becoming a patron through the link on our website to support the Cachemaniac shows. GeoGearHeads is produced by Chris Umfenauer and Daryl Wattenberg. The show's copyright 2016 by Daryl Wattenberg. All rights reserved.